Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
In any given classroom, you've got 5 young people who probably have a diagnosable mental health condition, not to talk about those other ones who are earlier stages and who may just be struggling for a shorter period of time.
We've got to make sure that we know the scale of the issue so that we can put those resources in place, right?
We don't always know what to say, but the most important thing is not having the answer. It's providing a space to let those young people speak.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday. The home of the UK's conversation about mental health. It's Mental Health Monday. Great to have you with us once again. First and foremost, wanted to say thank you in particular to Sharon and to Rachel for sharing their story as part of last week's podcast. As part of the radio group that I work for, we had Baby Loss Awareness Week content going out throughout the whole of the week, sharing their stories, hearing from different people, mums, dads, grandparents who'd lost children through baby loss. We're talking miscarriage, stillbirth, neonatal death, really tough topics, but spoken about in such an open and honest way. I want to thank the team for their coverage across the group, but also the people who took part in that coverage, who shared their stories with us. I really appreciate it. And thank you as well for your feedback to last week's episode. It means a lot that people see value in sharing these conversations and open up conversations around baby loss and grief and all the conversations we have here at Mental Health Monday. That will continue, I assure you. This week's episode focuses on young minds. Now, I was lucky enough to spend a little bit of time with the Young Minds team on World Mental Health Day, which was actually a week ago today. But they've conducted a survey, and it's a big one as well, 14,000 young people. And there's some really concerning findings to it. In a few moments' time, we'll hear from Diedre Kehoe, who's the Director of Training and Services at Young Minds. And they're a great organisation that have got some brilliant resources. I'll signpost you towards those as well. But let me just guide you through some of the stats and the facts around this. 35% of those people surveyed, 1 in 3, said that they had had a negative experience when seeking support, including from teachers, GPs, and other professionals. So all the while, we're saying, ask for help if you need help, speak out if you need support. 1 in 3 young people who did that say they had a negative experience. Now, what about this as well? More than half of those surveys said they were embarrassed or ashamed to reach out for support or for treatment, 51%. And at the same time, 37% said they didn't want anyone to find out they were seeking help for their mental health. Again, the mental health conversation is opening up, the taboo is breaking down, but those figures that are around stigma, embarrassment, shame, they're still so high. At the same time, there's a backdrop of record NHS figures as well. NHS data says that it's got the highest ever number of referrals to children and adolescent mental health service, the old CAMS. 250,000 young people referred to the NHS in the first 3 months of this year. That's already half the total figure referred in the whole of last year. So there's so much going on here. And actually, once again, one of the things that is cutting through is concern, particularly from teachers, that the pandemic is continuing to have an impact. And yes, so many people are looking to move on from the pandemic and say that it's over and say that it's done and say that we've moved on from COVID. But as we'll hear from Diedre now, it's still very much with us in the mental health world.
Yeah, indeed. So over the last few years, we would say that attitudes towards children and young people's mental health has come a long way. And so today we're far more likely to talk about mental health than we were in the past. And we're far more likely to consider mental health as important as physical health. And I suppose whilst that is positive, and that's been one of the more positive aspects of the situation we've just been through, there is still loads of work to do. So we know from the survey that we recently did in Young Minds with 14,000 young people that 35% of them had a negative experience when they reached out for support. And that includes from people like teachers, GPs, and other professionals. So people are starting to talk about it, but when they ask for help, they're having negative experiences. And even more worrying, about 51% of the young people that we talked to said they were embarrassed or ashamed to reach out for treatment and support. And so that really shows that the stigma for mental health, although it's lessened, is still there, and it's impacting on those young people in their everyday lives. And the real I suppose that's very disheartening figures for us. And the real shame of that is that we know if you reach out for help early and you ask for support early, you get that support, it's far more likely to be effective. So we really, today on World Mental Health Day, we are shining a light on this really and asking people, whether you're a parent or whether you're a family friend or a trusted adult in that person's life, for you may be a person in school, a teacher or equal pastoral staff or office staff, or indeed in mental health services, when a young person is looking for support, please kind of think about what they're asking, really be encouraging and supportive of them talking to you. And remember, you don't, particularly for parents and trusted adults in the community, we're not trained on mental health. We don't always know what to say, but the most important thing is not having the answer. It's providing a space to let those young people speak, and then reassuring them that you're there to help them sort it out. You'll help them to find their way, because you'll find your way together.
And I think it's interesting there, because I think, the stat you picked up there, 51% said they were embarrassed to ask for help. 37% said they didn't want people to find out they were asking for help. But equally, if you had a bit of a funny rash or something, you wouldn't want everyone to find out you're going to the doctor to talk about that. Or if you found a lump or a bump, you'd maybe keep quiet on that one. But actually, that really concerning figure, that 35%, those who did ask for help, and how many times have we had that conversation, Dee, where we've said, we need to be getting people to open up, ask for help, and actually for them to then come across stigma, lack of education, or whatever it is, that shows that almost the system isn't built. We're not built as a society to have this big conversation that so many of us are actually calling for.
I think that's absolutely right. And remember, people are waiting for weeks and weeks and sometimes months on end to get that support. And that's why at Young Minds, we've recently launched a campaign called End the Wait. And that is work and just putting pressure on the government, I guess, in their new 10-year plan, which they've promised for mental health, that they're looking at this at every level. So we want more support in schools, making sure schools and the environment around those young people that they're in almost all day, every day, are able to respond and have the resources to. That when they reach out and they're referred into mental health services, that they're seen quickly and effectively and they're not turned away. And also, that whole thing about stigma in the community, we need to normalize it. We all have mental health. We accept it in other people. It's much harder to accept sometimes that for yourself, isn't it? So we would really love to see support hubs going into every community, where walk-in centres where you can go in, find someone to speak to, kind of formally or informally, but it becomes a normal part of functioning in your community, would be just make such a difference for that early help and perhaps destigmatize it so much more.
I guess, Diedre, though, for young people at the moment who are thinking, should I try and get some help? They could say, well, the people I speak to in the first instance might not understand me. And even if that is the case, I'll become one of, a 250,000 young people who appear on a waiting list. So what's the point in asking for help? And that's, I could understand the reasons why someone would ask that question, but we've got to make sure that we know the scale of the issue so that we can put those resources in place, right?
I think that's right. But we must remember that even, getting that formal support is really important. For many young people, that's an hour a week or 2 hours a week of professional support. But it's often the network around them, the family and the friends and the people that they interact with every day that provide so much support around of that wraparound support. So although, yes, there are horrible statistics about waiting lists, please remember that there is also a triage system in place for those. So if you really need help, you will kind of get that help a little bit earlier if you're in real crisis. But often it's having that person in your corner, on your side, the person who you can drop you a text or send you an email or give you a call or pop to your house just to see how you are, and who really cares about you, can make all the difference. It's very intangible, but recently we've talked to youth workers and we talk about the importance of love and commitment, in those relationships, whether they're a friend or a youth worker, whoever they are. It's really feeling that you are not alone as a young person.
What are the consequences, Diedre, if you get it right? If a young person comes to you and says, I'm feeling this way, or I think I might be feeling this way, and I felt this way for some time. If you have a positive experience at that point, what's the benefit that comes down the line?
So many. So one is you will forever, hopefully, continue to talk about how you're feeling and seek support early so that you can have whatever that needs. And remember, there's loads of charities out there, so you'll find loads of practical information and tips and signposting on the Young Minds website. But you've also got other charities like Shout provide a text line that you can, if you prefer texting people, you can go that way. The Mix offer loads of counselling and support online, and there's also Me Too, which is a forum for peer support for young people. So there is unofficial, or it is still official, there is still non-clinical support out there for lots of young people, and often that's enough. You know, an intervention like that can be enough to get them on their way. Builds up resilience, which is important for all of us. It gives us a good experience, makes us more likely to go ahead. And then when you look at the kind of the longer term impact of discrimination around mental health, you know, there's the Lancet, for example, came out with a new report today that showed it really impacts on job prospects and how people respond to you and health outcomes. So by, I guess, reaching for support earlier, you're more likely to avoid kind of the harder end of the mental health spectrum.
And equally for those who maybe think, well, I've not been on a course, I don't have training in this, but you know, a pupil or a student has knocked on my door and has started, you know, spilling their soul, you know, from their experience. Yes. You've got to have a response, haven't you, at that point?
You do. And this is the thing we hear most often on our parents' helpline. Parents often call us and they're terrified they're going to make the situation worse, or they'll say the wrong thing. The most important thing is that you don't need to be qualified. It's to listen and validate how the young person feels. Even if that's really hard to hear at the moment, it's just so important to understand and say it's okay to that young person to feel like that. There's nothing wrong about feeling the way they feel. It's really important that they talk about it. So just remember, you don't have to have all the solutions. It's not about that. It's providing that listening ear, and where you can, and not every adult will have this relationship with the young person, but where you can continue to work alongside them, continue to check in with them. You know, if they're going to reach out to a charity, or if they're going to go to their GP, checking in, you know, getting them prepared. What are they going to say? What do they want to say? What outcome do they want from that interaction that they have? Just helping them think through what it is they want to get from that is an enormous support.
I was going to ask you, Diedre, when a young person comes to speak to someone without that sort of adult supervision, if you like, how do they vocalize maybe some of the issues that they are dealing with? And when you're training people to deal with that, what are those things that you're saying, keep an eye out for them, maybe using this sorts of language? Because of course, many of us have grown up in a world where we haven't been taught, here's how you talk about your feelings and your emotions. So it's no surprise that if maybe young people speak out, they think, I don't quite know what to say, but it must present itself in words coming out of a young person's mouth. And what sort of things do they come out with?
I suppose it's not really down to keywords, unfortunately. There's no key phrase that we can all learn and know that's what it means. I mean, it's a whole range of things, from the words they say, how they express themselves, that changes in routine, whether they're still looking after themselves in the way they were, whether they're still interested in some of the activities that they were, how their behaviour. So we're hearing a lot about behaviour in schools at the moment. It's seeing behaviour not as a problem in itself, but really thinking about what's behind that behaviour. So it's really quite a difficult one to answer, because there's no simple answer. But it's so important, I suppose, that those who young people go to, whether they're GPs or youth workers, or indeed mental health services, who are absolutely trained and qualified to do this, but it's about having that training and awareness as part of their induction, part of their college, you know, just becoming a doctor or becoming a social worker or any of those people. Listening skills is really key, and that's what it comes down to.
And I asked you before about what if we get it right? What if we get it wrong? You know, what if it is, you know, somebody meets that, well, 1 in 3, you know, who have that negative experience? What are your fears for the consequences of what that will mean?
Yeah, I mean, the fear is that they won't reach out again until they're in absolute crisis mode, and of course that has the worst possible ending. You hear so much from families of people who've taken their own lives, that you know, they had no idea, if only they'd spoken out. So it's really that being there for them, reaching out, particularly when someone pulls away, you know, just not letting go too easily, just continuing to check in without being too insistent that they talk, but just keeping that relationship going is so key and so important. But yes, I mean, for the government, I suppose if things are not dealt with up early, when they're first flagged, they can escalate into really difficult mental health situations that are lifelong and ongoing and will impact that individual's every part of their life, or could end up there. So it's just so important to get it right at the beginning.
And of course, if half of young people feel embarrassed to sort of reach out and speak about their mental health, it's impossible to say to a young person, don't be embarrassed, because particularly if an adult says that, it probably makes you feel even more embarrassed. But what is that mindset we can put into young people where they can think, I am worthy of support. I don't have to feel like this. And if I do speak to someone, it's only right that they support me.
Yeah. And again, I mean, it comes back to that one trusted adult. So, there's loads of research. We've seen some recently done in Dublin with Jigsaw that just said it's just one special person in your life, one trusted adult in your life can make all the difference. So it's not that every single person needs to be qualified and know what they're doing. It can just be one person who can impact for the rest of their lives. So what a privilege that is for us as adults, isn't it? That we have this opportunity. So let's be there for young people and continue to encourage them and continue to address the stigma that's happening around mental health, so that as we go forward, it becomes less and less of an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in terms of those numbers that we're talking about here, I've got a stat here. 241,791 young people were referred to the NHS in the first 3 months of this year, which is almost half where we were for the whole of last year. So we're not talking about like one or two young people that might potentially present, within a school environment. You'd be talking about numbers of children in a class, certainly within a year group. So this isn't like a minority issue that there's a chance you might deal with. If you're working on the front line with young people, you will already know that this is an issue staring you right in the face.
Yes, and we at Young Minds, we do lots of training of people in the community, and they're not people who are there for mental health reasons. They're there who, they run art clubs or music clubs or sports clubs, and what they're seeing is this coming through, and they really want that extra support. And you are absolutely right in terms of the numbers going up. So in 2017, NHS stats said that 1 in 9 in a classroom, so a classroom of 30 young people, had a mental health disorder. They updated that last year. It's now 1 in 6. So you think about that. In any given classroom, you've got 5 young people who probably have a diagnosable mental health condition, not to talk about those other ones who are earlier stages and who may just be struggling for a shorter period of time. So it is very common. Young people are talking about it more. They're talking about it amongst themselves a bit more. So it's just now making sure that they're not ashamed to talk to us as adults about how they're feeling.
No, absolutely, and there's work to be done, I think, on all sides. But we've got to say that from a young person's point of view, all we can do is create that environment and have that reassurance and almost a sense of, if you do reach out, this is what your support will look like. I think as much as anything, you think, well, what's going to happen? Does like a van show up outside and I get thrown into the back and taken away and I never see my family again? And that seems like a silly thing to say, but a young person will think, what if I say I can't cope, or what if I say what if I finally talk about this eating disorder, or what if I find
and of course it's the very same for adults, isn't it? It's and that's where our empathy comes from. I would hope that we find it as adults really incredibly difficult to ask for help, and we have the language and the experience and possibly other friends in our networks who have experienced this before. If you're a young person, you don't have the language, you don't know that it's happening other people in your classroom or in your friendship group, and it's only when you start talking about it you realize that you're not on your own.
Absolutely. Young Minds, we've got some brilliant social posts, resources online for this one as well. We'll point people in the direction of the Young Minds website. I'll put a link as well in the podcast as well for that one, Diedre. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for speaking to us today.
Okay, thanks very much.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.